Today, we're going to start what will definitely be at least a 2-part series, might end up being 3 parts, on hoarding and ADD and ADHD. I want you to know that you don't have to tick every box in the DSM-5 to be somewhere on the continuum. There are different levels, all right? And the behavior and the challenges, they transition and look a little different in adolescence and adulthood from what you might have been told if you were ever tested or given an ad hoc feedback from the school system, all right, or parents or whoever. So just know that this, again, it's a challenging thing. I see the reason I wanted to make this such an important topic, like the first comorbidity we deal with, is I am personally astounded at the number of people who come to me who are on the continuum of either ADD or ADHD, and they are completely unaware of it, all right? You can't hit the target of your challenges. That's like having a plan but not knowing what the details of the plan are. No wonder there's so much frustration among people and blaming themselves for being unmotivated. And I don't know why I can't just, maybe some of the factors that you're actually dealing with, even if you're not a 100% ADD person or ADHD person, maybe that could be part of it. Maybe there's way too much holding yourself personally responsible and not having enough of the details that you need to give yourself half a break. The other thing I'd like people to do, if possible, is we'd like to kind of track, not necessarily who is here necessarily, but where you're from. All right, so that we have an idea. I know that our audience has expanded to the States and even England and South Africa and where was the other one? Australia. So I like to kind of track that. So if there's any way in the messages or in the chat you can say hi from blah, blah, that would be wonderful. We'd love to start tracking that. Okay, so I'm going to start. Excuse me, I have to wet my whistle here. I'm going to start with the DSM-5, the Diagnostic Manual of Mental Health Disorders. So just bear with me, all right? All right. So when we're talking about attention deficit or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, there are certain criteria. And the criteria fall into 2 sections. Section 1 is inattention, and section 2 is hyperactivity and impulsivity, all right? So it isn't just any inattention or annoying inattention. There has to be a persistent pattern of inattention and hyperactivity / impulsivity that interferes with the functioning or the development as characterized in your ability to attend or your vulnerability to inattention and your vulnerability to that second section we're going to get to, hyperactivity and impulsivity, all right? So when we're looking at the section on inattention, we're looking at you must have 6 or more of the following list. And they have to have persisted for at least 6 months to a degree that means that you have an inconsistent ability to have a reasonably level and uninterrupted social, academic, or occupational life, okay? Note, the symptoms are not solely manifestations of other things like oppositional behavior, defiance, hostility, or failure to understand tasks or instructions. Excuse me. For older adolescents and adults age 17 and older, you must have 5 symptoms. You must tick 5 boxes. Okay. 1, the first box, often fails to give close attention to details or makes careless mistakes in schoolwork, at work, during other activities. For example, overlooks or misses details and work turns out to be inaccurate. Okay, that's 1. Often has difficulty sustaining, so you can attend, but you can't keep your attention on it. In tasks or play activities, like difficulty maintaining your focus during lectures, conversations, or lengthy reading. All right. The third, often does not seem to listen when spoken to directly. For example, the mind seems to be elsewhere, even in the absence of obvious distraction. You're not unattending, you're not rifling through papers or doing other things, but your attention just is not there reliably. Okay, next. Often does not follow through on instructions and fails to finish work. So schoolwork, chores, duties in the workplace. For example, starts a task, but quickly loses focus and gets sidetracked, all right? A really good one is user manuals, all right, or instructions. If you find it really difficult to read that manual through and attend and understand what's being said, and you have to continually go back, and there's nothing wrong with the manual, it's a good manual, that might be the start of an inkling that this might be something you want to pay a little more attention to, okay? Often has difficulty organizing tasks. How many of you have told me that's an issue? And activities, for example, difficulty managing, you gotta love allergy season, sorry folks, sequential tasks, difficulty keeping materials and belongings in order, and messy, disorganized work, has poor time management. Remember the procrastination segment when we talked about wishful time and clock time, and fails to meet deadlines, okay? Now this is in the inattention section. So this is as true of ADD, even if there's no hyperactivity involved, all right? But it can also be the combination. You can have hyperactivity as well. Often avoids or dislikes or is reluctant to engage in tasks that require sustained mental effort, schoolwork, homework. For older folks, later on, adolescents, remember 17 and above, and adults, preparing reports, completing forms, submitting your reimbursement requests, reviewing lengthy papers, all right? It's the duration, it's that sustain, that's the operative word here, all right? Next, often loses things necessary. So they're necessary things, necessary for tasks or activities like school materials, pencils, books, tools, wallets, keys, paperwork, eyeglasses, mobile phones. These are necessary things. They're not things that you've put away and they're stored somewhere and you're trying to remember you haven't used them in a very long time. Where are they? This is where are my keys? And it happens in a repeated fashion, all right? Okay. Is often distracted by extraneous stimuli. So noise, bright and shiny thing, could be anything really. And for older adolescents and adults, it may also involve unrelated thoughts, so intrusive thoughts. Now, we're not talking about the type of intrusive thoughts that individuals have with OCD, where they imagine disasters or their flashbacks or their some kind of visualization. We're talking about just random thoughts of things that you have sort of had on your daily or weekly agenda, but they just kind of, it's like they float by, all right, and they interrupt, all right, frequently. Is often forgetful in daily activities like doing chores. So you tell yourself, I'm going to do 15 minutes a day. You even go to the point of choosing a time of the day when you're going to do that 15 minutes. But you don't formalize it. You don't reinforce it with some of the tools and strategies that we're going to cover probably next week. All right. So those, you lose track of them and you commit to it, but then you get forgetful. Running errands, for instance, you need to fill the car with fuel. You need to go and get medication. You've run out of milk and bread and egg. And so why that's important is because the degree to which that forgetting errands and chores and that kind of thing, that adds chaos to your day. And that uses up motivation. I want you to imagine taking a piece of paper, all right? How long did it take to make that paper? All right, that is a lengthy time process from cutting down trees, right? But you can undo the good of that by lighting a match to it. That's how quickly you can create chaos in your life. All right, these things are important. They're not just details in the DSM-5 because they add unreliability, chaos, demotivation, and then you end up blaming yourself or running on adrenaline to try to make up for losing these things or forgetting these things or paying the consequences of not filling your car with fuel. All right, paying bills, for instance, keeping appointments, returning calls. This is the second part. Now, hyperactivity and impulsivity. 6 or more of the following symptoms have persisted for at least 6 months to a degree that is inconsistent with your developmental level, your age and developmental level, and that negatively impact directly, all right, on social, academic, and or occupational activities, or all three, right? Again, the symptoms are not solely manifestations of some other behavior, some other disorder, perhaps. And we've named those, so we don't need to name those again. All right. So for hyperactivity dash impulsivity, we've got often fidgets with or taps hands or feet or squirms in your seat. When you go, if you're at Starbucks or you're at Tim's, just look around, okay, at the number of people whose leg or foot is tapping on the floor or their hand is tapping, all right? That's a sign, that's a symptom of hyperactivity. Can also be a sign of impulsivity, all right? Okay. Often leaves your seat in situations where remaining in the seat is expected. Example, in meetings, in a classroom, in the workplace, and social situations as well, when you're sitting around. That inability to sit still and relax, this activity inside, okay? Often runs, okay, or climbs in situations where it's inappropriate. In adolescence and adulthood, it may be limited to just that internal feeling of restlessness. So with children, it's more likely to demonstrate itself with inappropriate climbing and running and just random physical activity. By the time we're adults, we're more likely to have self-regulated or gained enough control of ourselves. The disorder itself also transitions. Sometimes it's not about self-management. It's that the disorder displays itself differently, all right? So that feeling of restlessness, okay? As often unable to play or engage in leisure activities quietly and deliberately, all right? That distractibility. It's often on the go, acting as if you're driven by a motor. Or, you know, when people talk and they talk like they're and then they go down, they get distracted and they end up talking about, you know, somebody bought a farm and they've got a mortgage and then, you know, their X number of whatever brothers or sisters who inherited and shared, and then the next time, you know, they're talking about what crops they're growing, but that's not the salient point of the discussion. All right, it's unable or uncomfortable being still and being comfortable with it, all right, for an extended period of time, as in restaurants, meetings. It may be experienced by others as that person being really hyper energetic and restless, and it's distractible and difficult for them to deal with as well. And they can't keep up with the conversation. They can't keep up with what the person's doing or the activities. Often talks excessively. Often blurts out an answer and completes other people's sentences. Cannot wait for a turn in a conversation, all right? Often has difficulty waiting his or her turn in line, or waiting for a bus. Often interrupts or intrudes on others, butts into conversations, butts into games, takes over and corrects people, or butts into activities, insinuates themselves into activities that they weren't actually invited or included in or needed for. May start using other people's things without asking and not thinking about it. Never occurred to them that they need it. It's an immediate gratification thing. Or they don't wait for permission. They don't mean anything by it necessarily, but they don't wait for permission. It doesn't even occur to them. For adolescents and adults, it may be more demonstrated by intruding into or taking over what others are doing. So somebody's doing a task, and the person who has this level of hyperactivity / impulsivity takes over and finishes it for them, or does it for them without being asked. So the second part is several inattentive or hyperactivity symptoms are present prior to the age of 12, okay? So they're present in 2 or more settings, example, home, school, or work, all right, with friends, relatives, or other participants. There's a clear evidence that the symptoms, the ones we've read, interfere with or reduce the quality of social, academic, or occupational functioning. The symptoms do not occur exclusively during an episode of another mental health or schizophrenia, psychotic, or mood disorder. All right, it can't be explained by something else. All right. Anxiety disorder, a dissociative disorder, personality disorder, substance intoxication, or withdrawal period. Okay, it's not explained by something else. This is the more normal status of your daily life. I want you to know that there are varying combined presentations of inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. And that changes the classification. I'm not going to go into that. That's too much detail. But sometimes these things can be combined, as they can be, for instance, with hoarding disorder or hoarding behavior. If you're not quite tick quite enough boxes on the hoarding to be a hoarding disorder, but you have hoarding behaviors that you want to get a grip on, this can be attached to that. This can be combined with that. Does it cause hoarding? No, and hoarding doesn't cause ADD or ADHD either, but it makes it more difficult. It now is 2 things you need to manage, right? Now, I don't want you to pathologize yourself with this information. This is interesting, all right? In the same way as you don't blame yourself for your brown eyes or the shape of your nose or the shape of your ears or the color of your hair, or how tall you are, or what language you speak naturally was your mother tongue, all right? You don't blame yourself or judge yourself for that. I don't want you judging yourself for this either. Quite often, ADD and ADHD are part of your neurological genetic makeup, all right? And so you learn to, if your mother tongue isn't English and you're speaking English now, you learned to do that. All right. If your eyes are brown, and your hair is a certain color, you don't like your hair, you can change your hair. Whatever, you can learn to manage these things. This is to give you a heads up on, you know what, this is a problem. Not the biggest problem in my life, but I don't want to pay this price anymore. Something as simple as clock time versus wishful time. Or I want to learn how to not spend so much energy of my energy and motivation and focus trying to bring myself back to what I'm doing. All right. Okay. There are also different symptoms, severity levels rather. Mild is when there are few, if any, symptoms in excess of those required to make the diagnosis. So in some cases you needed 6 to tick 6 boxes. As adults or adolescents, 5 boxes, you didn't tick that many, then you may have a mild cause. So this means that it will be mildly inconvenient and disruptive. That's going to be easier to manage. Moderate, you have a severity level where you maybe just barely tick enough boxes. Severe, you tick most of the boxes, all right? Okay. It just tells you what you need to do in order to handle whether you need to actually look for getting help. I'm just going to erase this for a second here. Okay. Now, there we go. All right. Are there any questions? We have some questions here in the chat box. Let's deal with those first. Maybe I just want to handle this one section first, okay, so that you can start thinking about this. All right. How did your ADD or ADHD happen? All right. Brain imaging shows that there can be, not in all cases, depends on the severity level perhaps, a different structure and certain different activity, all right? More excitement factor, more triggering factors, more in brain imaging, more dots light up, all right? High probability of being inherited, right? So if you are aware of any family member, all right, that has, whether you knew before we read through the DSM-5, and I hope you're still awake because I know it's boring, that's sounding an awful lot like my cousin. That's sounding an awful lot like my grandmother or my grandfather or my aunt or my uncle or whoever. All right. There's a 35% probability, all right, that other members in that genetic profile will also have ADD and ADHD to some extent, all right? Now, if your parent has ADD or ADHD, that goes up, that percentage goes up to 40 to 57% probability that a biological child will have ADD or ADHD. And if you know the rule of 4, the genetic rule of 4, if there are 4 children, probably you're looking at 57% or higher. That is going to be a factor that they need to learn to manage. definitely be aware of, okay? So the first thing I want you to do is, if you suspect that you tick more boxes than you're comfortable with, and some of these things are ringing a bell for you, I want you to become the best informed person on inattention or inattention hyperactivity and impulsivity if it plays out behaviorally, all right? If it's just inattention, your mind wandering, focusing, hard to read things and not go back many, many times, having a conversation, but your mind wanders and the person himself isn't as boring as mud, all right? Anybody would be distracted, then I want you to become the best informed person, all right? Okay, let's look at the question in the chat room now. All right. Oh, Lisa wants to know, what do we ask or tell our bookstore library? Well, I'm not suggesting that if it wasn't your intention that you tell them to, or you say you want the book and you order the book. No, just tell them that you know, you're inquiring about the book. Is it available? Do they have a stock of it? Because you're considering buying it, or you're thinking of a friend and you want to tell them where to get it. Just raise their attention of it so that they go back and they check, and ask to speak to the manager. Okay, don't take the person who answers the phone, who probably also sweeps the floor and has no say. All right. Okay. I was just able to buy it on Amazon in a Kindle version. All right. That's good. The Kindle version is great. Thank you, Kelly. She's in Toronto. That's great. Amazon.ca is not the issue. All right. They can get it to you overnight in paperback. It's Amazon.com. So you can go on Amazon.com and you can do a contact us. Barnes & Noble in the States, Chapters Indigo, I would call them and ask to speak to the manager and just say you're having difficulty. Now, I know they may tell you, ask them, do they have stock? All right, and then just take it from there, okay? Will there be more than one group? There can be more than one group. It probably will not be in French. I speak French, but I'm not fluent enough that I can work in depth at a counseling level, all right? Now, the book, they're looking at having it translated. And I'm looking if the audiobook is received well enough. I'm thinking of having it narrated in French, in German, and we'll see where else has the most hits on Google Analytics. All right. Oh, that's a good idea, Lisa. You can title your name with the city you're from. It's great. All right. Yeah, we look here. Edmonton. We have somebody from Edmonton. Hello, Edmonton. Foot tapping is a form of self-medication for me. It's true. I actually have worked with people who, it's not the tapping, it's not the manual activity, it's that you're aware that this is something that pertains to you in your life, so that you know enough about it to adapt yourself so that you don't pay the maximum price. All right, because ADD and ADHD, when the person is unaware, and so they can't, they don't know enough to develop certain skills and strategies, they get a lot of criticism, and that criticism has an effect on them, their life, school, judgment, that they integrate that. That's the price I don't want people to pay. So sometimes smaller rural libraries can borrow it through interlibrary loans as well. That's a good point, actually. It's a good point. All right, let's move on with the material. I think I've answered all of the questions in the box. All right, so we're going to go through some just day-to-day symptoms. See how many of these you tick, all right? Not so that you judge yourself, just so that you can give yourself an adequate amount of motivation to make it a priority to understand this part of yourself better, all right? Trouble concentrating, easily distracted, highly impulsive. Do you make a plan and abandon the plan because you get distracted, all right? Difficulty staying organized. The best strategies, if you're not aware of what is working on you internally, all right, you won't be attributing your distraction to the right thing. You might be putting a lot of effort into solving the wrong problem, right? How many people have told me starts many tasks but doesn't finish? It's hard to listen closely. So you get part of the message, but not the whole message. Interrupts others when talking, all right? Forgetting urgent task, non-urgent task, disappoints themselves and others and pays the social or relationship price for that. All right. Doesn't make a commitment to themselves when they're producing something that's in writing. Just right out of the gate to tell themselves, I need to proof this because of my ADD or my ADHD, there's likely to be a lot of errors in it, all right? And so for you, understanding that when you produce a written document, do you want to type it? Or would you be better, for instance, to use a dictation app so that things are spelled properly, the spacing is correct. And then when it's not right, you get an alert with red lines or some kind of visual. That's going to help you. And then you go back to those spots and correct. All right? All right. Bores easily and finds life unsettling. How many people can relate to that? Okay. Overwhelmed by details. So when you get overwhelmed by the details, you can't remember and focus on the big picture. All right, so how does that play out with hoarding? So you're sorting things and you're going to put them away. And you start to take one thing, remember the 3 to 4, by the 4th step, you're probably putting it down. You want to put it in its permanent place. So you go to put it in its permanent place, but there's something else there. All right, and then you get distracted by that. So you take that out and then you think, oh, well, I'll put this away. But you forget, back here, this is what you're working on over here. All right. So if you are prone to that, and then that has to go in a drawer, and then you open the drawer, and oh, this drawer is a mess. It's got all got, and by the end of it, you have started 4 tasks and finished none. What I would suggest you do in that case, all right, is get yourself a laundry basket or a box. And if you are prone to any of these or enough of them that they're a problem for you, all right, they're a distraction, I would suggest you take the things that you're working on and put them in a condensed space, laundry basket box, and work from the box. And know that when you go to put something away, you do your best to put it away. All right, 3 to 4 steps from where you use it, no more. All right, and then you come back to the box. You've got something tangible to reorient you to what you're actually doing. All right, okay. Agitates themselves or others easily. Have you had that feedback? Poor inhibition, poor self-control. This is where things get a little more complicated. If you've got mild, you're probably not that distracted from day-to-day life. It's a periodic interruption. But if you're moderate to severe, I want you to attend to this section because it's the poor executive function. This is the boss of you, all right? The executive function part of your brain. It's that part that gets overwhelmed. And then it can't go. Think of life as the alphabet, all right? And to get to the end, you need to go through A, B, C, D. You need to have that plan, even if it's in your head, all right? And next week, we're going to be talking about how to externalize things, how to organize yourself in ways that are specific to ADD and ADHD. So when you've got poor executive function, you have difficulty with self-control, all right? And one of the ways that that plays out is that distractibility, that impulsivity, all right? What that costs you is your own wisdom. It costs you having real difficulty considering when you've got a challenge in front of you, considering past experience. What did I learn from that before that I want to do again because it worked? Or I don't want to pay that price again, all right? It works both ways. You're not as likely to be able to consider the past in order to anticipate the future and create the future outcome that you want. Why? Because you have difficulty putting yourself on pause just for a second. If you can learn one task, one skill this week, please let it be the ability to put yourself on pause. When you have to make a decision, when you have to do something, and it's not a rote activity. It's not something you do so often that you know inherently how to do it. It doesn't require consideration. All right. You go, As soon as you're in that moment, if you can just put yourself on pause and ask yourself, what do I already know, positively or negatively, that's part of me increasing the likelihood I'm going to end up with the consequences I want for the activity I have to make. And whether that's sorting, or it's organizing, or it's buying something, not buying something, whatever that decision is, please make today be the day you started to strengthen your ability to put yourself on pause. All right? That poor sense of time. All right, constantly rushing because you're working on wishful time. Go back to the procrastination book. All right, look up the one by Jane Burka and Lenora Ewan. If you weren't on that podcast, it is this book. All right, it's this book. And if you don't know it, where is the other book? These books are bought so frequently together. Amazon now has both of these. Often people who bought this book bought this book. Often people who bought this book bought this book. I love it. Okay, this is the perfect combination. All right. Okay, so that's by Lenora Ewan. Go back to the wishful time versus clock time. Okay. If you've got required tasks, I want you to get a piece of paper out and I want you to write those tasks down, and I want you to tape it on the bathroom mirror. All right, so that you have a reliable place to re-cue yourself, cueing yourself. Those reminder cues are so important to you. Okay. Low frustration tolerance. All right. That low frustration tolerance, the relief is distractibility or putting the job down. How many times do you put the job down because you're overwhelmed and you're frustrated? Right? 15 minutes. Anybody can do anything for 15 minutes. Just keep at it. Get a timer. Time it. Okay? Never mind. It's not 16 minutes. It's not 20 minutes. It's not 12 minutes. It's 15 minutes. All right? And then take a break. When that frustration hits, take a break. But push yourself through that first 15 minutes. All right. Some of the people who are having difficulty, who have acknowledged that they have ADD and ADHD, I've had many emails saying, please, can you cover this? All right. So I apologize to those of you who don't, but this week you're going to meet somebody and you're going to go, that's what it is. Okay. Oh, that's what it is. That was annoying me about that person. So what I've asked them to do, and you're welcome to do this too, all right, at no cost. If you find that 15 minutes, yes, you can do it, but you're not doing it, all right, you're not able to, at this point, you're not able to make yourself do it, then what I would ask you to do is 5 minutes. 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes a day. All right. I want you to take a picture of the before, and I want you to take a picture of the after at the 5-minute mark and send it to me. Now, you're not being accountable to me. You're being accountable to yourself, but you're doing something that is so important for you if you're living with a lack of motivation, you're living with something vague that you haven't put your finger on that keeps you from following through, or you have some level of ADD and ADHD, and that is externalizing. All right, those pictures will also be a motivation tool for you to go back to and say, you know what, whatever I didn't get done, I did that. I did that. That's my progress for right now. All right. Difficulty with self-control because of delayed inability to delay gratification as well. All right. That need. If you're someone who has a high need for gratification, immediate gratification, you probably are ranking higher on the severity level. All right. And that's something that is difficult to manage. And you probably know that already. So I want you to be patient with yourself. I want you to accept yourself, and I want you not to judge yourself. But you do need to learn to delay gratification more, because that alone, the ability to delay gratification, has the strongest relationship to success. Okay, that one skill has an extremely strong relationship to the success that you're looking for. Okay, also, when bored, more prone to taking shortcuts. All right, so I'm reading the book, all right, and I'm thinking, let's just find out how this thing ends. And then I switch to the back and I read the last chapter. I hear people tell me that frequently, all right? I can't stand the suspense, like, just get to it. What is it? Unmotivated to assimilate the instructions for new projects. Now, Adult ADHD, I want to reinforce this, okay, does not mean necessarily hyperactivity, all right? Even if you had hyperactivity as a behavior in childhood, it declines in adolescence and adulthood, and it's more likely to be experienced as that internal feeling, all right, of restlessness and the need to keep busy. All right. All right. Let me have a look here now. All right. Okay. Reasons to seek professional help. All right. With the ADD, ADHD, or mental health in general. All right. If it's severe enough. To make sure that the symptoms, if they're just intermittent, all right, or at the other end of the spectrum, all right, they're severe, all right, to make sure that you haven't missed something, that there isn't something else that is happening in combination. It doesn't mean you're crazy. It doesn't mean that you are terribly mentally ill. It just means that neurologically, most of the things in the DSM-5, all right, are at least in part inherited. All right, so this is not about pathologizing yourself or labeling yourself. This is about understanding yourself and then adapting you to have the life you want. So just making sure that there isn't something else in combination with these things that are ticking the box. And those things, all right, they may be something that you need a little bit of adjustment to for additional help so that you don't pay the maximum price for your symptoms with ADD and ADHD. All right. Also, sometime with severe enough ADHD in particular, medicinal self-management, all right, it can be important. But most of the medications have a high incidence of dependence, building dependence. And so it's really important that you stay in contact with your mental health provider, your doctor, so that they can manage those things, all right? Because even the best, most useful thing sometimes can have a potential negative side effect if it's not properly managed. And we don't want you paying that price, all right? Also, assess strengths and weaknesses, vulnerabilities to enable the best and most sustainable coping plan. And that's what I hope that we will do in this segment. And I want to hear from you. I want to hear, are there other comorbidities, all right, that you want to know more about? All right? And we will be posting, by the way, when we send out the invitation, we're going to be posting the topic for that podcast. So that if it's of particular interest to you, great. If you're not able to attend in person because your schedule got interrupted, you know where to find it on the website. All right. We have some others here. Oh, that's from Jim. All right. Right. There is also hyper-attentiveness. When I'm reading a book, I find interesting, I don't hear people who are saying my name and don't respond until they touch me. That is an ability to focus that is, I find awesome. I'm sure there's a downside to it, but if we could all have half an hour of that a day, that would be wonderful. So Lisa said this to everyone. Lisa, do you find that that interferes in some way, that you pay a negative cost for that?
Yeah, it can be socially a problem.
Okay.
I'm perceived as being very rude because I'll be absorbed in a task and not cue into other kind of things that are going on in my environment.
Do you have if other people are listening, do you have a strategy to deal with that?
Sometimes I explain that I have ADD and apologize.
Okay.
It depends on the context.
You know what? You're a grown woman, it's up to you. I would not apologize. I wouldn't apologize for having ADD. I would just, if you're going to be in the context, anyone in the context of doing something or participating in something, and that's part of what you know about yourself, just find a way to generically give people an alert. You know, when I'm reading, I really get engrossed. So I'm not ignoring you. Give them a heads up as opposed to apologize for any part of yourself. All right? There's nothing to apologize for. They have their faults too. They just may not happen in groups. Okay? Enough of apologizing. Just give them a heads up so they don't misinterpret your behavior. Okay. So Joan says, this talk makes sense. Energy to do the work, yes, is a big obstacle, and I see it's being taken by some of these issues like ADD. However, the work still needs to get done. It does need to get done, but you're going to get more of it done on a more regular basis, Joan, if you understand yourself. Then you can create an environment where some people, for instance, there's a uniqueness. Remember, right from the get-go, I said, we're not all the same. Everybody with ADD, it doesn't come out like, you know, a block of wood that is all the same shape and form. It plays out differently, all right? And so it's important that you understand. I've had people who, when I'm counseling them, need to doodle. And when they explained it to me, and we ran a little experiment, it's true. That doodling takes up one part of the energy that is that distractibility factor. All right, and they can attend more. They can repeat back. They are actually integrating the information. But it's easy to misunderstand that when you don't know that up front. I've had other people who need, when we're doing more physical work with hoarding, and they have ADHD in particular, all right, they need to have the music blaring, all right, and that just seems to take a layer of distractibility off. Now, I don't have ADHD, and so I have to attend a little harder. It's the uniqueness of us as individuals. What do you need? Where is it? And how do you get enough of it to succeed with the plan you want? Your homework this week, if you are prepared to accept it, okay, is to practice putting yourself on pause before you make any decisions, and to get that confined, discrete area for the things that you're sorting. In particular, all right, if you've ticked a few of these boxes and then you are cued to come back to the box, that's what you're working from. So gather up. The other day I was working with someone and there were a lot of things in the dining room area under the table, and we got a box and we kept filling the box, and both of us were working from the box. All right, in 10 minutes we cleared that area. Because why? We made a plan, we got the tools we needed, and we kept making ourselves come back to the plan, and we gave ourselves a visible, concrete area to be cued by. This is it. So if there was something else over there, we didn't get distracted. All right. If we took a cable, for instance, at one time, and there was a drawer that she liked to put the cables in, she went over, she opened the door, she put the cable in, she closed the drawer. She didn't get distracted by anything else that was in that drawer. And then forget about the box. It's the box. It's the box. It's the box. It's the box. All right. I hope this has been helpful for you. I'd love to have some feedback. And I wish all of you the best week so far. And I will see you next week. And we're going to be dealing more with tools and strategies to deal with this information. Take care, everybody. Have a great week. Oh, I've got 3 new messages. Okay, helpful.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.